now it's
my neighbor sold for $1 million, so I should be able to get $1.1 million, even though it's a
Right.
shittier house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Break It Down with Braydon. I got Ben Tobias on here with me today. Ben, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Ben and I have known each other for 7-8 years, something like that, ever since I first got involved with the Scottsdale 2030 Club. I think Ben was on the membership committee at the time. And then Ben ran our ABC event and then was president of the 2030 Club and just been a kind of a mentor for me in the 2030 Club world and then kind of in the real estate world as well. Just a well-respected name in the lending world. I think if people don't know the Tobias name out there in this real estate world in Arizona, they're probably living under a rock. It's definitely a well-respected name out there, and yeah, I think you've kind of earned that. And it's a testament to what you guys have accomplished over there at Fairway and kind of who you guys are and where you're at today. So
Appreciate that. I can't take full credit for the name, too. Obviously, my brother's in the business and makes quite an impact, right? But no, first thing you said, time flies, man. It's wild how far we've come. Seeing you grow, too, in the industry has been awesome.
Yeah. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself, your background, kind of how you got into lending.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So I got into lending about 12 years ago or so. I think it was 2009. So, in the national market and especially the Phoenix market, bubble had burst. We're kind of bottoming out, I guess you could say, and values are definitely on the downslope. And I had a background in engineering, actually. I went to school for engineering. I don't know if you knew that one.
I did not know that.
Yeah, so I have a civil engineering degree. And I got involved in commercial real estate. The business slowed down quite a bit in all fields 2005 when I got out of school. It was still booming that time.
Yep. Didn't
love engineering. Unfortunately, it took me a long time to figure that out. Wish I had known that a little sooner. But no regrets. But had that background. I got involved in development. My dad was in commercial real estate my whole life. So he worked for developers, brokerages, selling, buying real estate, developing real estate on the commercial side. I ended up working for a developer out of the engineering field, trying to take those skills to the development side. I always thought that'd be a really cool thing to do.
Yep.
But development stopped. I mean, in 2009, it was just nothing was happening. I ended up getting my real estate license to pay the bills on the brokerage side for commercial real estate. Did that for a little while.
Okay.
And at the time, my brother had been involved in mortgages for some time, for a few years, and was kind of tugging at me to come join him. And I'd made these jumps leading up to it. I'm like, I'm not sure if I want to make another immediate career change. Like, what am I doing here?
Right.
So sat with him about once a week for about a month. I'd come into his office and just
Do you remember how long he was in lending at that time?
I want to say he went into lending right out of school. He was a couple years older than me, so he was probably a good 6 years ahead of me.
Okay.
And he started off as a processor, worked his way up to a loan officer, worked for a builder, and then he separated from the builder and started just becoming his own LO, and just with the ideas of growing a team and seeing where that goes. I basically put a desk in after about a month of sitting in his office, because I wasn't going to make another third jump or second jump in a 2-year time frame. I didn't want to yet, but wanted to make sure this is something I was going to enjoy, that I felt like I was going to excel at. Sat in his office, threw a desk in there, and sat with him during lunch so many times. I'm like, I could do this. Like, I was following along what he was doing. He had a lot of success.
So
he had a lot of business coming in.
Trial period.
I hadn't joined him officially. I was just spending lunches, like hanging out in his office and seeing what he was doing, and just like hearing him on the phone, him walking me through guidelines, really only like a half a foot in the water of like, okay, is this something I'm going to enjoy doing? And
I love that, because it's probably good for John and it's probably good for you to kind of learn and see, all right, is this going to be a good fit for Ben, or is this going to be a good fit for me? Kind of thing. Like, do I want my brother in here?
we were close as brothers our whole life. We moved around a lot. I grew up in St. Louis, born in Indiana, lived in Texas, and every time we moved, we only knew each other, so we were pretty close growing up. Shared friends. He's a couple years older than me, so usually people in between our ages. I more shared his friends, I think, a little bit. Probably the little kid, kind of little brother, following along, tagging along, but he was always cool about that. We had a close relationship, but we didn't really think about it that way. It was never like this is interesting. I don't want to detour a little bit, but I heard a podcast you're on talking about working with your dad at once upon a time.
Yep.
And it was a really cool share that you had, and I share that it was personal stuff. My brother and I, walking into it, didn't think anything of it. I don't know if most people do, but we've had such a good relationship. It was never a question of, can we work together?
Yep.
We enjoyed each other's company. We were, consider ourselves very, very good friends, even as brothers, right? So, so I went through that little small period. I can do this. The real estate industry was very slow. Commercial was really tough. I was trying to convince people to relocate, and their business owners were telling me I'm just trying to keep my lights on. So it was rough for a lot of people. And so I said, I can do this. He was busy. The work was coming in, which was nice. When you're first starting off in an industry, you have that learning your craft, but then how am I going to actually go out and get customers or, people to work with me if I don't know what I'm doing?
Yep.
So he had that work coming in so I could learn pretty quickly. So that first year I kind of was off and running, felt like I had been in professional settings before that. So I knew how to be a professional to a certain degree, knew how to speak to the customer, really listen to the customer, what they're looking to do. And then I'm just learning guidelines. I'm trying to figure out how to actually get a loan done. So then after about a year of it, working, literally having a desk in his office, just, sharing information, it was amazing. It was a great time. And we grew, closer together, which was really cool. Team went from 2-3 people to maybe 15 people over the next so many years.
We were just talking about that. How valuable is that? How valuable was that, having the office or having the same desk right in the office with them?
I mean, just mentoring is amazing.
As opposed to having to shoot an email or walk around to the office, you guys were literally just in there conversing all day.
All day.
Yep.
And the things you can pick up from somebody, the little things. How things can be said,
Yep.
When
you're
portrayed.
listening to their phone conversations,
right?
And seeing how they handle those conversations.
I mean, I'm sure there was times. I mean, obviously I was learning a lot, but there's probably times where he was learning too. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, I mean, he never needed extra drive. He's a driven person, but hey, I'm right there. It's not like either of us could ever take too much time off or in between calls or whatever we're doing because it's just like, let's go. So, thankfully it obviously worked out. I've been doing it for a while now. He has kind of gone a certain direction of growth, developing branches and area managing, and to a point where he's working with branches all over the country now at Fairway. And we were just talking about Zoom, how much we don't love Zoom at times, but there's definitely a time and place where it's really efficient. And then I've grown my team now since then, kind of from a production standpoint, stand on my own, but within his area at Fairway, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So
what does the Tobias team look like now?
So it's funny because John technically, and I was with him as we developed the Tobias team. And there's others too that really attribute to a lot of that success. The team itself, when I grew my group within it, I separated from the Tobias team, so I needed a new name. And it was tough to go away from my name because we put a lot of time into that growth, I guess, that marketing brand, if you will. Yeah. So I became the Tobias Group. As confusing as it is, same company, same branch, the Tobias team, Tobias Group, if you can imagine. So ultimately, Tobias team has dissolved since then because John's focused on other things. So now it's the Tobias Group, and the Tobias team, I guess you could say, is no more. But,
Talk about a little bit about Fairway and the growth that you guys have had.
Yeah, it's wild. So when I joined Fairway, we came over together from another local correspondent lender that was actually corporate offices are out of Arizona. Mm-hmm. And we moved over about 8 years ago. And there was probably 15 loan officers at Fairway in Maricopa County at the time, if you can imagine. So not a well-known banking lender. Right. And it wasn't even in the top 50, I want to say then. And I remember talking to referral partners, agents we work with, that we were considering making this move. I would never make a jump without my partners, agreeing to it or backing me, having that blessing to a certain degree, because they make up our business. They're so invaluable to us. Excuse me, valuable.
Yep.
So because of that, it was kind of a big question of, we got some feedback from some people saying, I've dealt with Fairway, don't do it. We didn't have a good experience. Part of us knew that there's only 15 loan officers here. So, if you have one bad apple, that's almost, 8% or 7% of everyone here. Yep. So that could happen. But we reassured them. We really made sure it was going to be the right fit. So when we came over, it was just like, we were very self-sufficient as a group. The background of some of the pieces on the team, John's right hand, Rick, had a great expertise in processing, the back-end operations of getting a loan done, communicating with underwriting. So having those pieces in place, we knew what it was going to take to be successful. Something you mentioned in that other podcast that I did here was that, you can have everything up front from a sales standpoint. You can have the most educated guideline loan officer, the best follow-through, follow-up, charisma, sales, like helpful lending experience to your customer. But if you don't have the team behind you from a processing and underwriting standpoint, if they don't make that seamless, if they are not, with a good transition, whether it's them or the system, both have to really be in place.
Yep.
And luckily, we quickly had that. And if there's something wasn't right, the owner of Fairway was very much looking to John and saying, what do we need to do? Let's do it. He had once worked here in Phoenix as a loan officer. So as Steve Jacobson, who's the founder and owner of Fairway, had said, we want to be number one. What's it going to take? Yep. And he put his trust in John and some others that were, what do we got to do here? And was just willing to make it happen. So it just exploded. It was just kind of
really took on your guys' systems and implemented
so you have the corporate backing behind you of, okay, we trust you. If that's the way it should be, then we'll do it that way.
Right. And
I wasn't as involved in that process. I can't take too much credit because I really was just a loan officer on the team. Sure. I was focused on just doing loans.
Yep.
Yeah, so we had a few of people like me that were really good go-getters, good head on our shoulders, had good work ethic, and we were going to make this work. But John and another gentleman, Jim, and then Rick, these guys were the minds behind getting the processes dialed in with the company. Yep. And it just, and that we've had luckily a good reputation, I think, and John was always very likable and hardworking and has led by example type of person. That there's other people from other companies hearing about it and they just wanted to hear more. And then when their ears perk, it's like there's an opportunity. And then it just, it's gone from, like I said, like 15 loan officers. And there's other area people now, a lot of really good loan officers that have branches here. And a lot of these branches, it's interesting because traditionally people think office, like one office, one branch. That's not always the case. You could have a branch with multiple offices.
Yep, we did the same thing here.
Yeah. Yep. So it's gone, I don't know, there's got to be over 250 loan officers in Maricopa County easily, I would think. I don't even know.
Yeah.
So
how many locations do you think?
Locally?
Yeah.
There is, I would guess to say there's probably 20 to 25 addresses.
Yeah, I was going to guess.
Maybe 25 offices, whether they're smaller, some are bigger than others.
Yep. Some
might be a 5-person office and some might be a 40-person office, 30, 40-person office. So our branch consists of about, I want to say 6 or 7 offices here. Our area, though, there's kind of like an area of it that there's some California offices involved, and some outside of Arizona otherwise that are considered part of our group now.
How would you say you guys are unique for your agent partners?
Well, as far as a company, I think it starts at the top of the Midwestern roots, understanding people. Like it kind of starts with just who do you want to be in business with, right? The type of people that are going to work hard for you, that understand people, that really do these things for the right reasons. Not bean counting type of people, but people that are really interested in the customer and the family that we're assisting. Yep. So I think it starts there. And then ultimately, Fairway is a large company. There's over, I'm going to think over 11,000 employees nationally now. So it's a large company. And how they've developed our investor direct stuff, Fannie, Freddie, and Ginnie, is always helpful. The relationships we have with the investors on the back end, the amount of money on the back end to service our own paper to a certain degree, it can come into, it's very valuable at certain times when needed.
Yep. So you got a lot of products that other people don't necessarily have. Or
we do. And Phoenix is a very competitive marketplace. You know this, right? And it's kind of like the beta testing place too of technology.
Yep.
All different industries.
Yep.
And because of that, I would say there's a lot of good competition here. There's a lot of good loan officers, a lot of good companies. So a lot of people have a lot of similar products because of these things to remain competitive. And the ones that don't might struggle at times because, your partner, let's say it's a real estate agent, your partner is going to want to be able to take something to you and ideally you get it done. And if you can't get it done, you know why you couldn't get it done and why maybe it could get done somewhere else. I mean, just having that knowledge. So the more you can do, the more you can control. The faster you can get it done, I think. But if you talk to 10 of the top loan officers in Maricopa County that are with 7 different companies, they're all going to have 90% of the same thing for the most part. It's their drive. It's their ability to, create the relationship with the client, having the service levels. I mean, service can't be underspoken how important it is.
Actually taking the time to educate them.
Yeah, and just making them feel like they're your most important client. And then, answering your phone on a Saturday and responding to the emails same day and keeping people updated throughout the process. There's no, insane science to being, successful. It's just the hard work, the mindset. But, kind of going back to your original question about Fairway, being able to do down payment assistance products, being able to get things done creatively from an underwriting standpoint. You're still going to have the same guidelines to a certain degree. Maybe one investor that we have might allow us to do something. Now is an interesting time as things change, as we're kind of coming out of this fog of the COVID era, whatever. And there was a lot of these non-QM, as we call it, qualified mortgage banks that went away because of the risk factors of these higher risk loans, if you can call them that don't fit typical guidelines, that you just can't sell to Fannie and Freddie if it's a conventional loan. Those guys are starting to come back. So then it kind of come back. You can never be too comfortable, right? You can never be. It's very easy to maybe have some success and then just think you're in your groove and you just kind of keep doing what you're doing. Yeah. So and the technology shift. I know you guys feel that just as much as we do, maybe more. Okay. That if you are not always learning and you're always trying to see what's the new thing. What's the best way to pass that information on to your client? What's the fastest way for them to apply? What's the easiest way for them to upload documents to you? You got to stay in front of all those things. Otherwise, you're behind in the race. And all of a sudden your one slower week turns into months, turns into years, maybe. I mean, your career, if you're not ahead of, the curve. And then just staying motivated and being adaptable to change.
Yeah, are you up to date on all the lead gen tools? Are you up to date on all the social media stuff, all the marketing stuff, everything that's
it's funny your mind goes there because 15 years ago those things really weren't that important.
Right.
They weren't talked about as much. Maybe I should say they were important, but it's for someone. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. Someone who kind of heads up business development, if you will, and marketing for our branch. And we've worked together for 8 or 9 years. We were having a conversation when she joined our team at the company we were at prior to Fairway, it was almost very original to have this person on your team who's not doing loans, who's not actually touching loans at all. It was just you had your loan officer, your processor, your underwriter, and maybe some pieces in between, but that was your process. And to hire someone to help people with their business, to just talk about programs, to just set them up, literally digging in with a partner saying, how can we really help you outside of just getting your loan done?
I remember when I first got into title, people were always like, well, could you come do that on the mortgage side? And I'm like, well, I didn't know that was a thing. They're like, well, it's really not, but I mean, I don't know why it couldn't be. And then all of a sudden now, everyone's doing it.
Yeah. And it's a big step to hire someone, to put them on the payroll, to just try to carve out a role that's never been done before, to throw money at it kind of just to see if it's going to work. But I mean, now it's just if you talk to any fairly successful loan officer, they have some go-to for that. And whether it's their own person or it's their branch's person or whatever, because, if your partner is being offered other things by other people, you got to stay ahead of that too, So it's interesting to see that explode over the years. And now it's just so common. But you're right, though. I mean, you don't want it to be a two-way street with your partner, or you don't want to be a one-way street with your partners where, although now and then we have certain partners just keep doing what you're doing. You guys are awesome. We're not looking for anything more. Just get my deal closed. Because maybe they've been burned enough in the past where it's more valuable that you can close in 2 weeks and you can do what you say you're going to do. And my client is just so happy that we referred them to you. That's enough. But, an agent 6 months in the business, they're going to need more than that. They're going to need a little more arsenal. Or if there's an agent that has a 6-person team, they're expecting more. And rightfully so. So we try to dig in a little more with lead gen or, like you said, social media, or getting them dialed in with systems, or whether it's softwares like HomeBot, or just different ways that we're going to help them grow their business, whether it's follow up to past clients even, which is like something that we've worked really hard on, bringing back a client a year later. Hey, we talked to this person. They're actually thinking about buying an investment property.
Right.
Oh, thanks so much. I mean, maybe they're in contact with them, but maybe they're not. But we make sure they get back in contact with them.
Oh, and I found lenders are typically better at that than real estate agents, and it's obviously in your guys' best interest because of the refinance opportunities. Obviously, they might have the opportunity to resell their property or whatever, but it's not as likely if they're. I think it's like every 6 years that people are buying and selling properties now, where like. If they're refi and shit, I mean, the last 3 years they were probably doing it every 6 months or whatever.
Yeah, I think the statistics were always like the average was 6-7 years of being in a home.
Yeah,
but there's homeowners that buy a house every 2 years. That's
a good question. How many homes have you owned?
I've actually owned 3 homes.
3 homes?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there have always been homes I've lived in. I don't buy investment properties, although if the opportunity was there, I would consider it. But it's never been a focus. And I think...
would you buy today?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, there's so many variables to it, right? But of course, I would buy it anytime if if it makes sense. But the variables are shifting, so you just got to be mindful of the reasons why and what you're doing. And absolutely.
Yeah. I get that question all the time of like, should I be buying now? Is it a mistake to be buying right now with where prices are going and if inventory going up and whatnot? I'm like, I think it's just like. The stock market, it's never anything that you could time correctly. It's better to be in the market than it is to be out of the market. And
well, there's always a bad buy in good times and a good buy in bad times, right?
Yep.
So there's definitely a lot of opportunity, especially in the last couple of months. It looks a lot different now than it did 3 months ago. It's like the fastest shift we've seen in years.
Yep.
And I'm sure you talk about that with your guests too, because it's so topical right now. And it's almost hard to stay ahead of the news for the common consumer because things shift so fast. I mean, the mindset of the buyer and the seller, it's like wild how fast it turned. But there's always going to be a good time to buy no matter the marketplace. It just depends on what you're going to use the house for, where the opportunity is. Yep. I mean, what price and value you're getting at, how long you're planning. I mean, you're going to rent it out, are you going to live in it? Are you renting now? So many things to consider of why it makes sense to buy or why not.
Yep.
But yeah, I think there's definitely some good buys out there for different reasons.
At what point should someone start talking to you if they're even considering buying or thinking about buying?
I mean, sure, it sounds a little cliche, but right away, right? You gather your information as early as possible. It just arms you. Information's power, right? So ultimately, the more you know, the more you can plan ahead best for yourself. So ultimately, if you're I want to buy next year, why not start working on your credit? Why not start looking at your savings? Why not get an idea of what a monthly payment looks like? You may think you know and you don't know. Maybe you learn more and you're like, you know what? I mean, there's many times you talk to a buyer like, my lease is up it's August now. Yep. It's like, my lease is up in March. I just want to get an idea of kind of what my options will be when that comes around. Sounds good. You start the process with them and here it's November, like, hey, I'm ready to break my lease and go buy this place. I found out I can do this. I didn't realize it. And, it's worth it for me for this timing. So you just don't know unless you know, right? So until you know.
Well, I think one of the best things is you brought up is credit mentoring and the fact that, like, okay, if you get in early, have you pull their credit, and now you can say, all right, look at these accounts, pay these accounts down. This is going to adjust your credit score to this much, and you're going to save this much on a monthly payment. And just kind of advising them as to how to do those things is just extremely valuable.
Yeah. I mean, we work with a lot of clients that'll call us on a Saturday. They want to make an offer that day, and they're under contract come Monday. But, it's a big deal. I mean, home ownership for the average person, there's a statistic that came out 2 days ago, I think, and it was about how I think it's 2/3 of the most wealthy 50% of people of America, right? And that goes from if you are your net worth is 10 million or, if your net worth is 100,000, it's like 2/3 of that net worth is equity in their home. So it's kind of like how important that asset is for your investing. So it can't be overstated. Why not take your time and invest it? I mean, if you're going to go buy a stock, you're probably something you've thought about for a while, or you're looking at it, or you mentioned stocks, or however you're investing your money. Why shouldn't you take your time into buying an investment? Not to mention you live in that investment, and maybe you have kids that are going to be raised in that investment. So there's so many different levels to that from a personal perspective.
Yep.
But yeah, I would say it's one of those things that's like the sooner the better. And hey, if you don't buy for another year or two, no harm done. It's not like we're collecting money up front. I mean, obviously, we're helping you. We're doing all those extra things, like credit repair or advice on savings or getting the best interest rate you can or programs you qualify for. We're doing that so we can earn your business, of course, as your lending company and loan officer team. But yeah, I mean, that's where it starts. And that's why also you separate yourself from your competition as far as, who's giving the best service long term, and to not smother a deal. Like you talk to a buyer and they don't want to buy tomorrow. If someone's like, oh, I don't want to talk to them until they're ready to buy, it's like you don't get it.
Right.
You're not understanding the big picture here.
Right. Yeah, it's a big decision people are making. It's not like they just make it on a whim. A lot of people do.
Yeah.
But
and even from a business development standpoint, no one wants to be treated like they're a commodity or like that they, if you're not ready to buy right now, you're not important to me.
Right.
Like we want to have clients for life, right? So maybe it takes a year to get them in the right spot for them to buy, but ideally they're going to be coming back to us when they want to buy that 6 years later or 3 years later, or if they want to refinance. I mean, that's the best thing ever, that I don't even have to advertise to someone. They come back, you guys did such a great job, we want to use you again.
Yep.
There's ways to stay in front of them and get their updates from us on the market and different things like that. But, the better job you do up front, the better they will remember you, the more they'll remember you, so that you have those repeat clients. And real estate agents know that even better than we do, because their livelihood depends on that referral business.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you see kind of on the horizon for the real estate industry in general as a whole? Is there anything?
The technology is a big part of it. I think we get caught up in the today. 6 months ago it was like, or let's say before COVID hit, even the iBuyer, the cash buyer, those big investors were coming in. They were making a huge impact in the marketplace. And if you talk to people involved in those, they're like, hey, in 3 years from now, 1 out of 3 deals is going to be done with cash. This is the way it's going to be. And that it started looking, and it was going that direction. Some disruptor hit, and then all of a sudden we went right back to what feels like the norm again. Yep. And, so these shifts happen. I do think it'll be an ever-changing industry. I think technology, like most industries, are going to play a huge part in it. I think there's always going to be a place for the human to be a part of it to succeed in the industry. Yep. But it's interesting. I mean, it's interesting seeing things shift and, different companies having different opinions on who should be getting commissions and how. Yep. How we stay competitive on interest rates, the systems of applying online, and can the robot tell you that what you qualify for? Can the robot tell you what's best for you? Right. It's an interesting time. It's a fun time, though. I think it's kind of a cool time to see the change. But you gotta keep your head down and keep grinding if you want to keep your head above water, I guess. Yep. Through it.
Yeah, it's been cool to see, because there's definitely like a shift, like you said, in terms of like the iBuyers of the world and the open doors being gone and Zillow stopping buying all their properties. And it's funny how many times I talk to people now, they're like, oh yeah, I sold a property to Zillow, and they're still holding that thing, trying to get rid of it or whatever. And it's an interesting what's kind of taking place.
It's exciting though. It's exciting because it's changing, and change, I think, can be exciting. Yep. It's perspective, I guess, and just keeping the right attitude too and mentality. But there's talk right now of properties that, if they're not going to be exchanging hands without changing the condition of the property as much. Like before, someone could buy it with cash and sell it to this person to then fix it up to then sell it to this person. And the way the market is shifting right now is you don't have that intermediary. If that original cash buyer, they're going to have to do what they need to do to that house to a certain degree to make it sellable. Right. And, and with the cost of labor and goods and everything that goes into, updating houses, yep. It's an interesting time right now of what's going to happen with all this inventory that needs to maybe be unloaded, or these, larger institutions that might need to start getting rid of it, and how they can go about doing it. 6 months ago, a buyer would come in and buy a house out of necessity. I don't care as much as my master closet's small, or that extra bedroom's on the other side of the house, yep. or, the things. They might have had an idea of what they want in their perfect house, but they settle to a certain degree.
Even the inspection defects are like, oh, whatever, we'll deal with that later.
Oh, yeah, nothing
yep.
from the seller.
Yep.
Just deal with it. This is what it's going to take. Otherwise, we don't have a house. And so, on the other side, now the buyer has a little more time to think about it. you're going to have a house that maybe has a little wonky floor plan that's not as desirable to the common buyer. Those are going to sit longer on the market, and the value is going to be more normalized, I guess you can say, as opposed to just, per square foot, that's what it sells in this area, so it doesn't matter what the house looks like. It's just, checks the boxes on paper.
My neighbor sold for $1 million, so I should be able to get $1.1 million, even though it's a shittier house. Yeah,
so that those changes will affect the deal. And it'll affect the market, and it'll affect time on the market and values because of it. We're starting to see things come down a little bit.
People always want to know from their lenders what's your interest rate predictions.
So 2 months ago, it was kind of those things of we're going to see rates continually rise up through the end of the year, and then first quarter we could see it drop back down. We saw it drop pretty significantly over the last 2 months in June and July. 2 weeks ago, the rates were lower than they had been since May. So that's like in the last 60 days prior, they were at the lowest level they had been in that 60-day period. We've seen them kind of tick back up. We know that a Fed announcement's coming in February, where as of right now, thinking another 0.5% increase in the Fed rate. We always see rates with that known information. We see rates go up leading up to that. And then usually right before it, we see rates kind of come back down again. And they make the announcement, they come down even more. But it's like an overcorrection of this like swing of what they think is going to happen and what the investors, how they're actually shifting their money.
That's
and
kind
how
of
they're
what I
buying
heard
mortgage-backed securities.
As long as they do what they say they're going to do, then it's typically fine. But if they say that if everyone is expecting them to do this and then they go do this, then it's like, we got to freak out and everything's going to adjust. But as long as we're expecting they're going to raise it, so then as long as they do raise it by this amount, then everyone's okay. But if everyone's expecting them to raise it and then they don't raise it, or they raise it a little bit more than what's expected, then everyone's like, oh my God.
Well, it's one of those things too. It's like the Fed that adjusts the rate is just one indicator of, one thing that affects interest rates for mortgages. And the powerful people, whether it's Wall Street or the big investors that are really buying, or if it's the U.S. government, they impact the actual market maybe just as much, if not more. And they're reacting to future news that they know about long before the common consumer's kind of aware of it. So the shifts kind of already occur. It's like, this isn't the best comparison, but like the stock market. You think a stock's going to go up, it's going to do what it's going to do before, unless you're like really in the circles that are making the big impacts in value, you're behind the news. You're behind the times a little bit to where you're kind of just hopefully benefiting from the after effects of what's actually happening. And that's kind of one of those things with the rate, these announcements coming. The rates have been raised around the times this year they thought they were going to be raised. But so, I know I digress a lot. No, it's going to be interesting to see what happens next year. I do think that, right now, rates are not that far off of 5%. They were in the high 4s, and I'm generalizing. So there's so many different variables that affect, like, your FHA rate or your credit score if you're conventional rate, whatever. But let's just say rates are now in the high 5s. They were in the, low 5s when they were in the high 4s. A 5% interest rate is not, and this is, I know we talk about this a lot, so I don't want to be too redundant, but like historically speaking, it's very low. It's true though. Before COVID, we had rates in the 4s. So when we're 1% higher, it's like not what people were freaking out about after the first quarter, like second quarter of this year, was just that rates went from high 2s to 3% in like less than 6 months, 5 months. You're looking at a rate jump of like 3%.
Double,
Yeah, it went up 2-3%. So then it's like the fear of where's this going? And the consumer that's like waiting to buy is like every day I'm losing money.
Are like interest rates are going to 10 by the end of the year. Just wait. I'm like,
okay. Well, if it kept at that trajectory, it would have. But nothing, and obviously it hasn't, and it leveled off and it dipped back down, and we're going to start seeing it climb again. So if rates are in the 5s, even if it hits the 6s, it's not, the inflation is going to play the biggest part in this, is what's being said. And right now, inflation's still a little bit significantly higher than I believe the government wants it to be. Luckily for the U.S., this was kind of the idea before, was that we're the cleanest shirt in the like dirty laundry. Like it's kind of like, I think it was a few days ago, the dollar's worth more than the euro which is a big deal. Like the international economies are not faring very well either, and because of that, we benefit, in the United States.
Yep.
So when everyone else's money is inflating, your inflation doesn't feel quite as bad. It's when yours is inflating and everyone else's isn't, then you have even the bigger problems, like from a national economy standpoint.
I was talking to somebody this morning about that. They were talking about how Russia and Brazil and I think there's like 13 other countries that are trying to start their own dollar now.
Yeah. I think China might be.
China's one of them. Yep.
That's obviously one of the bigger players. I know Russia's been pushing. What I read too, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, and how that actually affects things. But a lot of these economies are suffering right now too. So, well, again, interesting times.
Yeah.
How crypto plays a part in some of these things. We'll see how it plays out. But
love it.
Yeah.
Well, Ben, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. It's good, man.
For everyone that wants to get a hold of you, how can they reach you?
Well, they can call me. They can even leave me a voicemail, and I'll even call back, which is crazy these days, right? No, I was thinking about that earlier today. It's just like, half people I call don't have a voicemail set up. It's like people text.
Yep.
Got to text, man. But my phone number, my team line, 602-288-8842. Did I say all those numbers? 602-288-8842. We got a team email that I receive emails on and calls on these. That's a team line to call, and then our team email is TTG. It's the Tobias Group at fairwaymc.com. Cool. And you can reach us through that too.
Love it.
But yeah, we'd be happy to help anyone who wants to even just kick around some ideas and talk about their goals of home ownership.
Love it. Again, guys, Ben Tobias, Fairway Home Mortgages, and he's absolutely just a great guy out there and a good guy for advice. So if you ever have any mortgage questions or just want to chat about the industry, give him a call. Thanks guys. Ben.